Hello, got a couple people in the chat, so I thought we could start just a minute early. I mean, we won't really get into it for another minute, but I can at least say hello to everyone via voice instead of making dumb jokes in the chat. I can make the dumb jokes live. So welcome to, I guess this is FM Basics 2, technically is probably what it is. I mean, that is what it is. The FM Basics 1 lesson that we did last week, I did have done in text, and so I was able to post that completed lesson to go through before or during or after. I'm still working on the actual text version of FM Basics 2. This will be, largely this will cover that same ground, probably a little less organized. That's a lot of times what takes me a while to put out the text versions of these, is I have to organize my thoughts. I read it out one way and I go, oh, okay, but that doesn't make sense because we got to mention this before we go into that, and blah, blah, blah. So this is off the cuff. Consider it a rough draft of FM Basics 2. Or consider me recording a video for FM Basics 2 before a live studio audience. That's you. You're the live studio audience. So what you see on screen right now is the algorithm selection screen for the Korg opsix. I'm actually going to X out of that real quick because I want to do a quick... Oh, I should put my headphones on too so I can actually hear the synthesizer. Don't have to imagine it. Cool. So real quick, just to go over what we went over last week, a little refresher, or if you weren't here for last week, obviously you might need to be brought up to speed. Last week we focused on two operators and the controls for those two operators to show how much you can actually do with just two operators in FM, and to help wrap your head around what's actually happening with FM. I think a lot of times people get really confused because you're trying to swallow the whole elephant at once. And that's not the way to do this. If you break it down into manageable pieces, FM is actually, it is more complex than subtractive, but barely more complex than subtractive when you break it down to the elements. The way that things combine and affect each other, it definitely gets a little more complex, but you get to that point. You don't launch at that point. So just real quick, look at those controls again. Just sine waves. We'll get into a little bit about using more complex waves today, but we're just dealing with sine waves again today. Two operators 1 and 2. With the opsix, remember that the pink ones are the ones you hear, and the purple or blue ones, depending on how your eyes register that color, are the ones that you don't hear directly. They are modifying the carrier. So the pink ones are the carrier, the purple ones are the modulator. You don't hear the modulator, you only hear the carrier, but you do hear the effects of the modulator on the carrier. And that's where those complex tones come from. So these are both sine waves. They're the only things making a sound in this patch. You can see, I'm trying to point at the screen like you can see that. These four operators are all at level 0. This one's at, it's not even at full level. It was down a little bit, and then this one's at 51%. And you can definitely hear that's not a sine wave, right? It's a much more complex wave. And if you look over here in this little box right here, you can actually see that's the spectra of the wave. So this right here, that's the fundamental. And then you have, these are harmonics. And as you can see, this first harmonic is actually louder than the fundamental, and the second harmonic is probably just about the same volume. If you look over here in this box, you get a real-time representation of what the waveform we've created is. So the waveform we've created looks something like that. And it's wobbling because it's an animation, even though so it's basically just slightly out of sync with what's on screen. That's why it's wobbling like that. And so level, this is the level of modulation. The ratio determines, remember we talked last week about how ratio determines what essentially the tonalities, what harmonics you're hearing. And then the envelope controls that over time. Got a basically a carrier is just an organ style envelope, goes to full, and then full volume stays there and then drops off. The modulator peaks immediately, and then slowly, well, not that slowly, over the course of half a second, 466 milliseconds, goes down to a sustain level that's 66%, and so that's most of what you're hearing. And you can just hear that little bit of fade. Whew. Hold on, I'm going to take off my robe. It's kind of chilly in my house today. It's very rainy here in Sacramento today. Everything's very gray, and I was a little chilly, but now that I'm talking, it's got my body temperature up. I guess it's exciting to talk to you people, so it got me all not sweaty yet, but I'll be sweaty soon if I don't take that off. Of course, now I'm just a little too chilly, but what are you going to do? A swarm of dead insects, hello to you. Yeah, thank you for laughing at my dumb joke about forced effeminization. Good times, right? You have to be a little internet poison to even know what the fuck I'm talking about there. But okay, so again, just to real brief, last week we basically figured out how to use two operators to make a continuously variable wave shape, where the variation is determined by the envelope, and the wave shape, i.e. the harmonics that you're getting, is determined by the pitch, the relative pitch of the modulator. It's this right now, they are 1-to-1. If you go to that, and that produces sort of a saw-ish wave. 2-to-1, get more like a square or triangle wave. 3-to-1, and gets into an interesting kind of hollow guitar-like tone. 4-to-1, similar to a square wave, but with higher harmonics, skips some of the lower harmonics, etc., etc. Just goes up. You don't really have to memorize it all. The point is just that each ratio is going to give sort of a different target wave shape. And that's, again, it's continuously variable throughout the whole. You're going to get some differences with 20% modulation versus 70% modulation. Okay, that catches us up to where we were last week. We just did an hour's worth of... Oh, there's also feedback. Sorry, almost caught up. The one last thing is the feedback parameter. That can be accessed. Feedback can be accessed on a per voice level. That's usually determined by the algorithm, or on, depending on the synthesizer, and all FM synths are a little different here, or on a per oscillator level in this case. And remember that with just a single oscillator and feedback, you can create a very digital sounding, but very much a saw wave. Because consider that to get the actual saw wave, you have to have the feedback, but that's why I say a 1-to-1 ratio is a saw-like wave. You don't have the feedback necessarily. You might have the feedback, but to get to the saw wave, you need the feedback. But if you don't have the feedback, just have the two operators, you can get something saw-like, just can't quite get all the way there, but it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And of course, with feedback, no matter what the pitch of that operator is, it's always going to be a 1-to-1 ratio because it's just feeding back. So whatever pitch it's playing, it's modulating itself at the same pitch. It can't do anything else. It's just one operator. Okay, now we're caught up. All right. So now we're going to jump to algorithms. And algorithms, we did everything with two operators last time, and algorithms are how you bring in the other operators. And so the first set of algorithms that I want to deal with are numbers 5 and 6 here, because these are, if you have been working on subtractive synth architecture for a while, I have no doubt that you are very familiar with 2 or 3 oscillator synths. And these algorithms basically give you a 3 oscillator synth, where each oscillator has a continuously variable wave shape that's highly controllable. The oscillators don't interact with each other. It's basically just 3 separate oscillators. And so this is a very similar setup to a lot of subtractive synths, like if you've ever played with a Mini-Moog or Mini-Moog emulation. Classic 3 operator monosynth, right? Or 3 oscillator monosynth. You can detune the oscillators, you can pick different wave shapes for the oscillators. Depending on what other sort of modulation controls and other things you have, you might have one oscillator create the attack portion of a sound and the other oscillator create the body of the sound. You might have one oscillator adding texture. You can detune them to make them fatter. Lots of different things you can do, right? And all of those things you can do with FM, with these algorithms 5 and 6. On a 4 operator synth, you'll generally have, it'll also typically be algorithm 5, at least ones that are derived from Yamaha synths, which is a lot of them. Or in any case, what you're looking for on a 4 operator synth is one of these where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then it wouldn't have this 5, 6, but whatever number, however many algorithms you have, whatever order they're put in, that does not matter. This order is completely arbitrary. This is just the designers at Yamaha decided this was the order of algorithms that made sense. Why did they decide that? I couldn't tell you. But when you are getting started, so like here, this next step, the thing to do is to work with these stacks of, 3 stacks of 2 oscillators. So, and this is no more confusing than using just doing 2 oscillator voice shapes, or whatever. All you're doing is just adding additional oscillators, which are operator pairs. So let's just go ahead and turn up all 3 of these and start. Well, actually just, here's a fun on this synth. You can just paste the settings, so it's a little faster, so I don't have to like manually reset them all. And so now we basically just have, what if that's, right, this is the feedback set. It is, it's set all the way up. That's why that last one's so fizzy. And so all this is doing is making it a little louder because we didn't even detune. There's no detuning or anything. It's just louder because there's 3 oscillators, 3 operator pairs acting as 3 oscillators playing the same sound. And if we go to our pitch, for example, we can detune these, for just a typical. And we can also detune the modulators. So this is something, and maybe someone who's actually smart at this stuff and who hasn't, like, I'm not smart really in any way, shape, or form. And I don't have any special insight or anything into these. Like, I've never built an FM synth. I don't know how to program one from scratch. I've just figured all this stuff out over the years playing with it. So the point of me mentioning that is that there's some discussion. I think some people would say, oh, you don't really need to detune the modulators as well. To my ears, it sounds better. And so it sounds more like traditional detuning. And my understanding of the FM theory suggests that is the truth, that's actually what's actually happening. But if you prefer it only detuning the carriers and not the modulators, then you should do it that way. Or if you prefer to tune them different amounts. But I think to get a traditional detuned oscillator sound, you just detune them, do the same amount of detuning on the operators or the carriers as you do the modulators. And this might be not all of them have a detune function. This synthesizer does. It just detunes the oscillators from each other. You might have to use the fine tuning on your synthesizer, but same principle, whatever. Just make sure that if you're going to detune the, just use your ears really is what you want to do. But if you're not getting the results you expect when you go to detune because you're, say, just detuning the fine on your carriers and it doesn't sound right to you, try detuning your modulators, and vice versa. If you're detuning the modulators and the carriers and that doesn't sound right to you, try just detuning the carriers or try just detuning the modulators. So once you sort of know, again, you're just sort of dealing with things in a very de minimis sort of way, like the approach that removes the most external factors, right? Speaking in scientific terms, you're trying to reduce it to one variable that you're tweaking. But yeah. So this, you can see here, we took this 2-up Vox lead thing, and then just detune the oscillators to make it fatter. Now this also has a unison mode. Some FM synths have that, some FM synths don't, others have. I have operator up here, and we might jump over there and look at it. Like, it has a spread mode that's kind of a similar thing where it detunes. It just adds a second operator set and detunes it and pans one left and one right a little bit and does like a chorusing effect. Same kind of idea. It's similar to unison. Some synths won't have a unison at all, and then you would have to do it this way. It's just different ways you can do things. This synth has way more voices than it actually ever needs. It's like 28 or 30 voices of polyphony, which, you know, who's going to make a 30 voice chord? So you can detune, you know, your voices and yeah, see, up to 4. Is it 4? Is that where it maxes out? Nope. 7, 8. 8 is where it maxes out. Yeah, you can put up to 8 voices of unison. And now that'll get you into those. Now a 4-note chord would use all 32 notes of polyphony. I think it's 32 notes of polyphony this has. I can't remember for sure. Okay, so now that you have if this was an actual, like, you know, the actual lesson plan, I would say you can stick with these two. And oops, sorry, these two. Remember, the only difference between these is where the feedback path goes on. And so that's one interesting thing I should say. Here you can do this feedback path here that goes takes the output of 5 and feeds it back into 6. So you can't do that on the per oscillator basis. All the per oscillator ones are feeding back like this. It just takes the output of that and feeds it back in. The algorithmic, the per voice feedback paths allow you to, in some cases, take the actual, you know, modulated output and feed it back. So you can get wilder effects, is what it boils down to. So that is something to keep in mind. And we even kind of saw that because on here, let's turn down. So we're just hearing, right? Okay, so don't hear the detuning anymore because detuning is always relative to something, so it's a little flat right now, or a little sharp actually, but there's no detuning effect happening. But what we're going to do here is, oh yeah, crank this feedback. And so you can see that's a much wilder effect than if you do the so this one is feedbacking just oscillator 6 into itself, which then modulates 5, and then this one is taking the output of 5 and feeding it back into 6. And you can get some way noisier, more chaotic, and if you look here, you can see it's still trying to make a saw wave essentially, but it's real fucked up. So that's another tool you have once you start dealing with algorithms, is more complex feedback paths. And again, this is an area where FM synths can differentiate themselves. I'm sure that there's some out there that have some wild feedback paths. Regular stream hanger outer and all around good dude and FM synthesis lover Rautvik, I can never, it's Icelandic, so I always mangle his name. Has offered up some the suggestion that the user algorithms here, which is what this is, where you can like program your own algorithms, allow for some pretty crazy feedback stuff. So that's something I might explore in the future. Right now, it's just you know, again, there's so much depth here, that you don't even have to explore all the stuff to really get into the wild weeds of what's out there. All right, and so that's just a little all right, so here we go. How about on this let's go here to 5, and we're gonna copy these settings to here. We're going to transpose this down. Transpose this down too. And that's just adding a sub-oscillator, essentially, right? It's just an oscillator, an octave down, doing the exact same thing. If we want to really make it a sub, that's honestly, that first setting was pretty close to it, because sub-oscillators are usually, not always, but usually square waves, right? Because they're easy to make from an oscillator. It's easy to derive a square. And so now we just added a square sub, right? Again, these are techniques I hope that you are very familiar with. And the reason that this is a square is this is tuned down an octave, right? Which means even though these say 1 to 1, this is actually a 2 to 1, because this one is going to be an octave higher, so it's 2 to 1. I know that's a little confusing. The other thing I could do to keep everything, maybe I should do that actually, keep everything a little more simple, is we'll do that. So this is a half to 1, right? This is the bass octave, so this is the concert pitch. This is, I'm pointing at the screen, sorry, like you can see what I'm pointing at. This carrier is playing concert pitch. This operator pair is going to make us close to a sawtooth wave at the concert pitch. This one is going to make, this is playing a half or an octave down, right? It's half the pitch. And this is a 1 to 0.5, which, if you remember your ratios, that can also be expressed as a 2 to 1 ratio, right? So this is now, and this is half to 1. So all these are now explaining, so this is playing the same pitch as this, but this and this are an octave apart, and this will be an octave apart. So when this modifies this, it's the same as a 2 to 1, and you get the result of a square wave an octave down. I feel like I may have made that confusing by over explaining it, so. And then let's say we wanted a quieter, so this is where you come in, where you, in a subtractive synth, you would be mixing, when all these oscillators go into your mixer, you would lower the level of one of them. But here we're going to make a quieter sound that's got a little, like a high-end kind of sparkle or edge, right, to the sound, the sweep that let's copy this, copy settings, copy, paste. Oh yeah, and see, we have these actually, I forgot, the default envelopes are a little different. So these will also not going to be quite as prominent in the sound. So the core sweep is this operator pair making a saw-like wave, because I don't think we have the feedback on. Nope, no feedback on there. We do have some feedback on here, but we're going to do like a weird 5 to 1 ratio. It's not a weird ratio. It's just a not the same as these other ones. It's a slightly more complex, and we're going to tune in just a little bit of fine here to give it a little wobble. Okay, sure, why not? Yeah, and you can see that adds, the element that adds is very distinctive. Maybe we want that even quieter, right? Maybe that's too much, or not quieter, but even less modulation, fewer overtones. But again, what I've done here is essentially no different than taking a analog synth, layering a saw-like wave, square like sub oscillator, and then this would be something like a synced oscillator, or maybe something with some noise added in or whatever. And that is the advantage of these synthesizers over a subtractive synth, is you can get these more complex and unusual wave shapes. Let's listen to just this one, right? It has this sort of glassy quality to it. It's also a little metallic and has a hint of instability. Right? So, but when you mix that in with these, and yeah, and this is just using this, and essentially the most simple. These algorithms are the most simple. They're the easiest to wrap your head around. You already know how to use them. That's why we're starting with them. They are just like stacking oscillators in a subtractive synth. The difference, one of the main differences, I guess, is typically in a subtractive synth, you would have your 2 or 3 oscillators that you would stack up. You would detune them against each other. You would do whatever you're doing to each one. And then they would run through the same filter, which would sort of impart a quality to them both that cements the sound together a little bit. Now, if you have a hybrid synth, which this is, you can still do that. There's a filter right here. It's on right now. It's completely open, so it's not really doing much to the sound, but you can also just turn it off all the way. I don't see if there's any perception. Yeah, I don't think there's any difference there when it's all the way open, but it might be taking a tiny bit off the top. But I'm old and went to a lot of raves and heavy metal concerts back in the day, so the top of my hearing, anything over about 14.5, I'm not hearing it. Like that's 14 is where I can really still 14K is where I can still really perceive frequencies, and up to about 14.5 I can it's that thing where it's like, oh yeah, I think I hear something going on, and anything above 14.5, forget it. I can't hear those anymore. So if you might hear this as a little brighter, you might hear a difference that I don't hear, I guess is what I'm trying to spit out, if there's something happening at the very top of the audible range. But probably you are also partially deaf on that high end range, and so if there is anything happening, you can't hear it. But if you turn this filter on and say turn it down, right? And so now we're into, you can see how this sort of like operates very similarly to a. So this is hard linked to operate or to envelope generator 2. So we go to envelope 2 down here at the bottom, and we can like put a sweep on this as well. All right. So, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but just pointing out that you can have additional control if you have these additional elements down here, but if you wanted this to be more like a subtractive synth, you just make sure the envelopes match, because typically in that you would not have, for example, 6 different envelopes all doing slightly different things. That's the advantage of FM, but if that's too much, if it's doing too much, you can just make them do the same. Just match the envelopes exactly. That is an interesting thing you can do, though, is make the envelopes. So for example, what if the sub takes, like a little, almost as much time as this takes to fade, like the timbral complexity takes to fade in. The sub takes that long to fade in, or not that long, but a little bit of that time to fade in. And maybe the sizzle, the weird high-end stuff, takes even longer than that. And maybe it drops off real quick. That's, like I said, that sounds unnatural, but there's nothing natural about this sound, but it sounds a little weird, right? So yeah, get the idea. Music, yeah. The filter graph log log scale. Boy, I don't know, man. That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question. You might have to look at the documentation, although I don't remember it saying anything like that. Are you asking if the filter's cutoff is on a logarithmic scale, or I'm not even sure what you're asking me 100%. You can adjust the curve of the envelope, the decay curve and the release curve, but I don't know if that's, so, you know, that's linear, and then it's like more exponential, but it's not logarithmic, right? Logarithmic's the other way. I can't remember. I'm not a math guy. I'm not smart. I think I made that clear, right? I'm not smart. Yeah, music-specific earplugs. Kids, wear earplugs to shows, even though you might think it's not cool and you might feel like you're getting less out of the experience. You will adjust to them within 10 minutes of being there, and even if it makes every individual show slightly less impactful, it makes long-term your show experiences much more impactful, and you won't have tinnitus when you're old. I will say, I did start using earplugs when I was in my late 20s, infrequently, not all the time. I wasn't religious about it. And then when I became a music journalist, I started using them religiously because it was my job. You know, I needed to protect the assets that I had, that I required, that I needed to do my job. And since then, looks weird. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily believe that the display of this has any relation to reality. I think it's just like kind of a, you know, a vague idea. Maybe it's, let's look at a different filter. Yeah, see, no matter what filter you use, all the low pass ones looks like they look the same, even though they're clearly a different slope. It's just kind of displaying the shape of the filter, I think. The high pass filter and the band pass filter look different. Beep, beep, beep. I think it's very much an approximation. I don't think you're supposed to get much concrete information from this display down here. Yeah. Okay. So when you're getting started here with algorithms, if you're scared of algorithms, stick with these two. Okay, or on a four operator synth, stick with just the one until you are no longer scared of algorithms, until you feel like you have mastered the complexities of FM as possible to express through simulated oscillator pairs by stacks, multiple stacks of operators, of two operator pairs. And when you're ready to go on to the next step, we can kind of talk about, there's basically a variety of types of algorithms. These first 32, by the way, I think I mentioned this, are the same 32 that the DX7 has. And then these 33 through 40 are added algorithms, which might have come from other Yamaha FM synths. I don't know. I think they might be the same added ones as the SY77 has. I can't remember. It's been a while since I owned an SY77. Yeah. If you can actually tune your tinnitus to your guitar to your tinnitus, that is handy. I think it would still be annoying, but at least it's useful. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. The point is, like, they're just different algorithms for doing, approaching different things. So let's kind of go through the sort of algorithm styles or types, if you will. Again, everything in all of these, you hear the pink ones. The purple ones are just modifying the other filters. So this is a pretty common, so you have a stack, here you have a complex stack on carrier 3, so lots of subtle or extreme modulation, right? And then your other operator stack, essentially your other oscillator, is or your other, maybe voice, I don't know. There's so many different, there's no agreed upon terminology here. I'm hoping I'm not confusing things or confusing y'all. But your other one would be simple, right? So you might use this one to create like a saw wave or a square wave. And then this is going to produce something more subtle or more extreme. Something where these are adding little bits of higher harmonics, and this is doing some sort of fundamental thing or whatever. And you'll notice that 1 and 2 are identical except for where the feedback path is. And that's another thing. You don't have to, I should mention, I wouldn't try and memorize algorithms. There's just not that much utility to like memorizing all 32 algorithms and what they're supposedly for or what they do. I think you're better off just understanding the sort of approaches to the algorithms, approaches to the way of organizing your operators, and then in the moment when you're working on something, kind of trying to figure out which approach is going to be best for you, by essentially just pulling this up and figuring that out, based on what you're trying to do. But yeah, so when you are trying to wrap your head around all 40 of these, 40 is a lot. It's a lot, right? Keep in mind that a lot of them just move the feedback path. 1 and 2, they're completely identical, except instead of 6 feeding back into itself, 2 feeds back into itself, right? Then you get into the 3 and 4 are basically our 5 and 6 for complex 2 oscillator sounds, more complex 2 oscillator sounds. So here you have essentially 2 oscillators. So again, a very classic monosynth or subtractive synthesizer configuration, 2 oscillators, which you could make identical and detune. You could make one the sort of main tone and one the attack. You could make, you pan them depending on the synthesizer if it allows you to do that. Lots of different things you could do, but you essentially have 2 identical except for where the feedback path is. And again, here on 4, we're mixing it up by making the feedback path go from the output, the carrier output, all the way back here, versus this one just feeds back up operator 6 into itself. This one feeds operator the stack of operators 6, 5, and 4 back into 6. So again, that's going to be much more extreme effects. 5 and 6, the only difference is 6 feeds back into itself on 5, and on 6, 6 is fed back by 5. Okay, so here we get to where we start having variations. So these stacks 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, all the way through 15. So this whole stack are variations on the same idea, which is that 2 operators outputting, and then varying degrees of modulation on this. So this is the same 2 operator stack we've been dealing with, right? Here, you have a 2 operator stack that's 3 and 4, and then you have a 3 operator stack that is 3, 5, and 6, and but these are working simultaneously. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, these are summed here, right? So in a stack like this, 6 modulates 5, which then the output of that modulates 4, okay? Here, 6 modulates 5, which the output of that modulates 3. At the same time, potentially, that 4 is modulating 3. And I say potentially because you could have an envelope where 4, and this is a pretty common use case for this, let's say 5 and 6, because that's where our feedback path is. You want to have a really percussive attack on. So you have 2 waveforms for your bass sound. For the sake of argument, we'll say they're saw-like. We're just using 1-to-1 ratios, no feedback. Detune from each other a little bit to give a little fatness and richness to the sound. So that's your core sound, right? That's being created by 1 and 2, by operator 2 modulating operator 1, and operator 4 modulating operator 3, to create your kind of core sound, right? That's the sustained bit. And then, but you have a really noisy percussive attack, right? It's just there for a split second, and it gives it like a real, here, you know what? I'm going to show you rather than try and explain this. Let's just create a sound. I'm going to initialize the sound and choose this, okay? So operator 1 and 2, this stack here, we're going to just do like a right? Kind of mellow, almost E piano-y. Kind of a deal here. Go to the pitch, and we will detune these like 5 cents. 5 cents. Tune this one a few cents. Right? So when they are, that's an excellent question. Yes. So it gets a little confusing though, because if you look at like 34 down here, right, this one goes, and so that could be confusing. But yes, this is just a vertical, this is a one big vertical stack, right, that just can't be shown because of the way that they're oriented. But yeah, anytime you see like this, where you have 3 of them going in, those are just essentially 4 is not modulating 5, 6 is not modulating 5. All 3 of them are modulating 3 individually, but essentially summed. Yes, I believe that's what's happening, is they're being summed at this point where they go into the modulator. So if only 4 is sounding, 5 and 6 won't do shit, but you'll still hear the effect of 4. If 4, 5, and 6 are all sounding at the same time, you will hear their effects on 3 all simultaneously. They'll all be adding, whatever modulation they're doing. And again, someone who knows the math and understands what's happening here can probably explain. I'm sure there are subtleties to this, but essentially, yes, your understanding is correct. The horizontal lines are where, anytime where these are on the same level, they're all modulating, and going into the thing, they're modulating it, but not each other, right? So I'm going to finish this example real quick, and then we'll get into, right? So we have this pretty chill kind of chorus, almost E piano sound, right? A very famous FM sound. So this one, we're going to have super high, this one even higher, and we're going to tune the feedback up pretty high. Okay, and then, but the envelope here, both these envelopes, we're just going to have a big splat of attack and less than a half second of decay. See what I mean? Right? You can make it even shorter. So you could use that to create like a string buzz, for example, or a, any sort of, you can also use it. It doesn't have to be like an attack effect. It could also just as easily be something that comes in. That's a very, an attack effect is a very, musical, like natural, right? That's a natural thing. Like you hit a string and it's noisy when you actually hit the string, and then as that noisy vibration dies off, you only hear the string vibrating, which is a much more tonal sound. So that's like something you're completely used to. But this is a synthesizer, so we don't have to do naturalistic shit. We can do whatever we want. And so you could have a thing here where it starts off as an E piano, but if you hold it for a second, it gets kind of gnarly and weird. Right? So different things you can do there. Right. So in this, then, so that's what all of these are, variations on that. Like, so for example, I need one oscillator, right? And we're talking about virtual oscillators here. All of these are oscillators. Every operator is an oscillator, an envelope, and an amp, all combined into one, right? So when I speak about individual oscillators here, I'm actually speaking about operator stacks acting as oscillators. So here you have essentially a 2-oscillator synth, right, where one oscillator offers a 3-operator stack, so relatively complex, subtle sounds maybe, or extreme sounds. And then the other one offers a operator with an oscillator that's can be modified by this one, or both together, summed, not modifying each other. Okay, that's the other thing. We are rapidly running out of time. I guess I had more to say on this topic than I thought. So let me run through the rest of these real quick. Again, these are all just variations on that. Just moving around, how many are, God damn it. How many of them are acting on any given stack and the orientation of them. And why would you use one over the other? Just because, again, an effect that you're trying to achieve something that's difficult to achieve with one of the other ones. And once you kind of get a handle on this, it can be really good to take your basic patch and scroll through the different algorithms to see how it affects the sound. And you start with one and you kind of go through and you say, oh, that's different, that's wild. And sometimes you can discover some pretty cool sounds that way. So then, and here you have these two, gonna modify this one. And then the third one. So here, if the envelope of 4 is at 0, you won't hear 5 or 6 no matter what, right? Because they're in line behind 4. So 4 is not affecting 3, 5 or 6 cannot affect 3. That's the other thing. In a vertical configuration, the further away you get from the carrier, the more subtle your modulations will be. This is an important point. I should have said it earlier. So, for example, on algorithm 1 here, right, 6 is going to have much less of an effect, relatively speaking, on the sound than 4 for two reasons. One, it's further away, so it's acting as it modulates this, which modulates this, which modulates this. But because of that, if the envelope for example, you might have an envelope for 4 that matches your envelope for 1 or for 3, right? It just goes to full and stays at full the whole time. But 5 does that attack thing, right? And so if 5 does the attack thing where it just blips in and out, it doesn't matter what 6 is doing. You're only going to hear the modulation of 6 when 5 is sounding. So just on that attack modulation, just what's in line with it. When you go to something like this, now 6 can have its own envelope that's completely doing its own thing, regardless of what 5 is doing, and they'll both be audible on 4. And here, 3 would only be able to modify 1 when 2 is modifying 1. And I did want to talk about, people are always like, oh, what about FM with more complex wave shapes? Well, good news, if you are using more than 2 operators, you are already using FM with complex wave shapes. So, for example, here, so we know that, well, first of all, with the feedback path alone, right, we can use complex wave shapes. If you set the feedback on this to high enough, then this operator alone becomes a sawtooth wave, right? So now you have a sawtooth wave modulating this, which modulates this. And that's what you should think of as the output of every operator in the stack is a waveform that you could theoretically hear itself, right? So you don't have to figure out what 6 modulating 5, modulating 4, blah, blah, blah does, 6 modulating 5, modulating 4, modulating 3, like it's some kind of giant math problem. It's just a bunch of simple problems, okay? 6 modulating 5 outputs whatever waveform, right? Now you have that waveform modulates 4. That's a complex waveform modulating 4, producing a more complex waveform, which modulates, then the output of that is that more complex waveform modulating 5, right? So, but you only have to figure out anything out ever in stacks of 2, like, and usually it makes the most sense to go up the stack. So first you want to set your modulations for 4, then for 5, then for 6, so that you don't, so if nothing else, so you don't get confused. Why am I not hearing? I'm changing the setting on this and I'm not hearing anything. Well, that's because 5 is not open, so it's not doing shit. Okay, then we get into the 16 through 18, which are just, these are going to be for when you need a waveform that's fairly complex, has a lot of different things going on, but there's no detuning or anything like that, just a single complex waveform. This allows you to modify it, lots of different ways, and here you get back into the 3 oscillator setups, because it's got 3 carriers, right? And just different feedback paths, different, I guess I kind of wish these were maybe organized by how many outputs there are. That would be, in my mind, a little more sensical, but I'm not the Yamaha engineers that organize these. I can't tell you why they chose this order. And then these last set are, again, they get back into the 3 oscillator setups here. I don't know why they didn't pair these or group these a little different, but I'm sure they made sense to them. But even so, you have double oscillator stacks working here, blah, 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 whatever. And then here you have these 4 outputs, or 6 outputs even. The last one is just all 6 outputs. So on a DX7, this would have been only moderately useful. This is essentially a simple additive synthesizer, right? You have 6 sine waves, one of which can actually become a square wave because it can self-modulate. So you have a simple additive synthesizer there. You can do some organ sounds and stuff like that. Similar here for additive, but in a synthesizer like this, where you can select the waveform, you have a very powerful like 4 or 5 or 6 oscillator synth that you can also do. So that's also fun. Yeah, for sure. So swarm of dead insects, those are excellent points. The more complex, yes, the more complex, the closer to noise, because, I mean, that's true of any sound, right? The more complex it is, the closer to noise, because noise is essentially a even or / random distribution of all possible frequencies. So the more frequencies that are in a sound and the more elements that are happening at once, the more overtones and harmonics and subharmonics and whatever are going on, the closer it is to noise. That's exactly right. And sometimes you do definitely want noise. I don't know what a Feynman diagram is, but I'll have to look that up. Sometimes you do want noise. Noise is very much a component of almost all natural sounds. Have some elements of noise in them. And if you want to, that's actually a sort of a larger topic, but the best way to improve the realism, the verisimilitude of your synthesizer patches is incorporating noise. So yes, you very much want noise. So these are here you might use, again, in an original DX7 for essentially additive synthesis. On this synth, you might use it for, to put 6 square waves into a big, giant, buzzy super saw or super square, or 6 saw waves for that matter, for a super saw patch. And then these are the bonus ones. So this would fit in with these, obviously. It's not even that different than that one. Or that one, right? Just rearranging the way the oscillators are. This is a giant stack of all 6 oscillators. There's a 2 oscillator stack with some different, here again, just feedback paths. Here you get into some interesting things where both stacks modulate both carriers. And most of these don't do, well, some of them do. Like here, this is modulating these 2, and this is modulating these 2. This modulates these 3 with all the same. So here, for example, since the output of 6 is going to be the same, regardless of which one it's going into, what you could vary would be the output of these, right? So here you might have an instance where this wave's doing whatever it's doing, and here you have 3 identical waves. And you could change the pitch of these. So maybe you'd have this one an octave up, this one at the core octave, and this one an octave down, and mix the relative levels to get different, so that you'd have identical waveforms. Actually, no, that's not even true. The octave, you'd have different waveforms based on the modulations. Okay, so FM is complex, but I think you understand what I'm saying here. You would have the modulation is going to be the same, and so the output of these is going to be, it's all going to be related, certainly. And then you'd have this other one kind of doing its own thing over here. But yeah, so these last ones do these weird things where you have, this stack modulates all 4 oscillators. And so based on what these oscillators are doing, you might have something pretty similar or wildly different. Again, if we're sticking with just FM, you're talking about like different patches or different wave shapes to some degree, but since this synth can do all kind of other stuff, those can get pretty wacky as well. Okay, I did want to talk a little bit about basic synthesis tools that are also available in FM. So most FM synthesizers, DX7 included, in addition to every operator having its own envelope, will have one or more envelopes to use for utility, if you will. Depending on the synth, it's highly variable what that might be able to control. In a DX7, what it controls is the pitch. It's a pitch envelope, right? So you have a pitch envelope that goes to all the oscillators, and that's how this is wired up here. This has a mod matrix, so you can do lots of other stuff with it. That's what this is right here. But it also has a hardwired modulation of what it expects you to do, right? And part of this is to give it DX7 compatibility. And so here's where you do a pitch envelope. I hope I don't need to explain what you might use a pitch envelope for in your basic synthesis. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's sort of a topic for a larger topic, but for example, percussion. That's like what I use them the most for. Percussive sounds have the pitch goes way up and then drops very quickly because when you hit something, you stretch the membrane, and thus the pitch, the vibrations are higher pitched. And to get a realistic percussion sound, you have to have a pitch envelope. So here's your pitch envelope, right? And if you want some vibrato, well, it also has an LFO wired that you can do LFO 1 to pitch, right? And you can also do velocity to pitch and stuff like that. All the normal controls. And then if you go if you wanted a tremolo, you could put the LFO to one of the carriers, right? Because carriers, that's what you're hearing is a carrier. So when the volume of something goes up and down periodically, we call that tremolo. And if you wanted a sort of a wah effect or timbrel modulation that's periodic, then you would you still do the amplitude modulation or level mod, but you do it on a modulator instead of on a carrier, right? And let's just let me go back to. Okay, right. So let's go into the level mod, and we'll say LFO 1, and we'll put it pretty high so you can really hear it. And that's all. That's what it's doing there. Is it's modulating the modulation periodically. Subtle, less subtle. And then here, that's modulating the volume, right? And it's a triangle wave. Let's do a square wave. Oh, that's a wrong LFO. There we go. There's some tremolo for you. Right? Okay, right. So, sorry, I got a little hypnotized by that, I think. You, I'm sure, are already familiar with LFOs if you are interested in this level of FM synthesis and whatnot. So you can do all the same things you can do in a subtractive or analog synth with your LFOs as you can in here. You can use them to control quote-unquote filter sweeps. Now, in this synth, you can do an actual filter sweep. But in FM synthesis, generally, filter sweep, filter style sweep, a harmonic sweep, right, where you're like opening the oscillator or the operator that's modulating in a sweepy fashion. I did several of those. Look, here's right here. And that just uses an envelope to do it, right? But if we didn't want to do the envelope, what we could do, okay, I'll just make that go like that. And we'll go down here to the level mod, and we'll pick LFO 1. Is this level mod? Yeah, it is. Okay, LFO 1, right? Let's give it a nice 3 seconds. Is probably too much. Yeah, like 1.5 and 1.5. And we will have it modulate the level. Too fast. Oh, that's way too fast. Get way down here. So now you have a periodic sweep, right? much as you might want to. And so that would be the same as using a LFO to control your filter cutoff, right? On a subtractive synth. And with the mod matrix, you can also use it to, you can get a lot fancier with it. But yeah, so again, typical FM synth, you're going to have one envelope, usually like the DX style. You'll have one envelope that's like a global envelope that's a pitch envelope, and one or more LFOs that can either affect pitch or level or whatever. Like in this one, it's LFO1 is hardwired to both the level mod and the pitch mod. So if you want to use something like the LFO2 or 3 for those other things, then you have to go down here to the mod matrix and use them here, which is fine. It's just the way they're organized. Next time I do one of these, maybe I'll fire up the DX7 if people are interested. I have a soft DX7, the Arturia DX7 emulation, but I think it's, I think it has all the same controls as the DX7, and so we can kind of look and see what the traditional one did. But yeah, that's basically it. I think that is, I maybe hope to touch a little bit on some of the other stuff real briefly, or on effects and some other stuff, but obviously that's a much bigger topic. Real briefly, I do want to mention, because I don't go into it too much on any of these, but your velocity, mod wheel, expressive pedal, CC controllers, you can map all those things to a good FM synth to do all sorts of things, and you absolutely should. One of the great advantages of FM is how expressive it really is. So each of these has a hard, you can affect the velocity of each. The level can affect the velocity of each operator separately, and that can result in some very expressive patches. So with a sweep or whatever, where you're just, but let's do this lead thing, right? So we'll set this one, so it's 51% velocity, so some, that's just the volume, right? But we'll also set this, to 71. So the soft ones are not only quieter, they're also more sine-like, versus when we hit it hard, see what I'm saying? And that's just two operators. Imagine all 6 of these sort of playing variations of the same tone layered up with different velocity controls for all of them, and how expressive that could be and how dynamic that sound would be. And you really, to get the most out of any synthesis method, but especially FM, you really got to look at the performance related and control related options. And again, with, imagine this oscillator stack, right, where 1 and 2 just play essentially a saw wave. That's your core tone, and then this is a very complex wave with a bunch of modulations it's controlled by the mod wheel. Mod wheel brings it in and out, and then you can also have some CCs, or maybe you've got a ribbon controller or something, and you are using that to control the tonal elements that come in and out. There are questions. Dexed. I don't know if it runs on Linux. Yes, Dexed is probably your easiest, cheapest, best option to get started with. Dext or DXed, Dexed, however. The Dexed is, because it is a FM, or because it's a clone of the DX7, it is a little confusing, I would say. It definitely uses the older terminology. It's much easier than a DX7 because it is full screen. You can see everything at once, but it does still use some kind of older terminology, and it's not the easiest thing to use for sure. This plugin is $100. I think it's either, or maybe it's $150 normally, but it's probably about to go on sale for Black Friday. I highly recommend it. I will do a stream that's just about it specifically too, because this does so much more than just basic FM. Every one of these operators has not only a selectable wave shape that includes 3 different noise flavors. And that's just so raw oscillator wise. It also, every one of these operators can also do ring mod, has a built-in filter. It can do filter FM, which is audio speed frequency modulation of the filter instead of the oscillator, which does some crazy noisy effects. A wave folder or an effect plugin, which actually allows you to add EQs, phasers, delays, comb filters, distortion, drive, decimator, wave shaper, and punch, which is it's another kind of wave shaper, all at the oscillator/operator level. So this plugin is freaking amazing, and I have the hardware of this as well, and I love it. It is one of my favorite synths. So yeah, and there are other good cheap/free FM synths out there as well. So I encourage you to find something that works for you. If there's lots of good 4-operator ones, for example. That's a much more popular. I can't even think of any right off the top of my head, but I know I've played with a bunch of different ones. And 4 operators is honestly plenty. Like that's what the Digitone has, is 4 operators. So it's very, very capable. Yeah, so that's basically it. We've killed an hour in a few minutes. I see I have text messages awaiting me on my phone, so I could talk about this for forever, but that's what next week is for, right? I would love to have any feedback. If this was a little less scripted than my last one was, so if it was confusing or hard to follow, I apologize. Like I said, I'm still sort of working out how I want to organize all this information, and hopefully I'll have the written one done in another week or two, FM Basics 2, and so you'll have that to refer back to, and it should be a little more organized than this. Reach out to me. You can leave a comment on the video. You can email me, iametherdiver@gmail.com, with questions. You can reach me on social media with questions. Either if we were mutuals, you can DM me, and if not, just tag me. And I'll follow you back anyway. If you have a question, that's, you give me a follow and tag me, and I will follow you back. So you can ask your question privately if you need to do that. Or suggestions too, if you're like, oh, this is really helpful, but goddamn, it would be useful if you'd talk more about this and less about that. That's all very helpful to me to know that stuff. So please don't hesitate. I'm on Mastodon, Etherdiver. It's at Etherdiver at ravenation.club. I'm on Blue Sky at Etherdiver. It's etherdiver.bsky.com or .app or whatever. Just search Etherdiver on there. Etherdiver.com is my website. Etherdiver.bandcamp.com. ampwall/a/etherdiver. All over the place is Etherdiver. If you Google Etherdiver, you find me. That's me. You might, if you go really deep in the results, you might find someone else, but I think all the main results are me. And I'm happy to take suggestions, questions, criticism, as long as you're nice about it. I don't mean nice. As long as you're respectful about it. You can be like, dude, you were a mess. I couldn't understand a fucking thing you were saying. This was really hard for me to follow, but I want to get something out of it. Can you please do it this way? I will take that into consideration. I can't promise that I'll actually be able to do what you're asking for, but I will certainly consider it. Thank you all so much for coming by. It is so great to get that people are actually finding this useful. Nothing makes me happier than someone watching this lesson and going, I should get an FM synth. So Mux, thank you so much for saying that. I hope that you get an FM synth and you come back with a lot of questions. I'll probably keep going with the FM for another week or two, unless people are bored of it already. There's obviously a lot more to cover. And then maybe get into the opsix, just a little bit into the depth of it. Maybe if it goes on sale for Black Friday, I'll do like a Black Friday stream where we talk about all the badass shit it can do. Until next time, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate it. Check out my music. Check out my sounds. Check out my website. I create a ton of different writing and sounds and videos and whatever for all different aspects of music and musicians and music lovers. So please check some of that out. Thank you so much. See you in a week.